Good afternoon. On behalf of Southern Oregon Climate Action Now, welcome to our 2020 interview series with candidates for the Oregon House, Senate, and County Commissioner. My name is Lori Kaplan. I'm a volunteer for SOCAN, and I will be your moderator for this interview. As a tax-exempt 501c3 nonprofit organization, SOCAN cannot endorse candidates, but we can offer constituents information on where candidates stand on issues related to our mission. The focus of these interviews is therefore limited to questions about climate and the environment. All candidates for the general election have been invited to participate in these interviews. Some have accepted and others have not. Today we will be speaking with Dave Dotterrer, candidate for Jackson County Commissioner. Thank you, Dave, for joining us for this session. I'll explain the rules. The format's very simple. We will have 2 minutes for Dave to provide an introduction, followed by 9 questions, each read by me. The candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question and then 2 minutes for closing remarks. To ensure a fair and balanced interview, all candidates receive the questions 7 days in advance and will be posed exactly the same questions. Also, to ensure fairness, there will be no follow-up questions. Dave Dotterrer, candidate for Jackson County Commissioner, welcome. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Oh, it's great to be here and all. And just a little background on how I view issues like this and how I view overall governance issues. I'm a person that really strongly believes in looking at everything, not just the issue itself, but multifaceted, the synergy between lots of different issues. And so when I view the issue of climate change, I view it in the larger context of just the basic governance of our county. And so this is one piece of the puzzle. And one of the things that I like to do, and I would be happy to do this as a commissioner, is to sit down with SOCAN and say, okay, so when we come up against these kinds of issues, what are some of the things that you are that are your concerns? And what I'm going to be looking for is synergy. I'm going to be looking for, let's first look at the things that we can agree on. We're probably not going to agree on everything, because I'm going to be viewing it maybe from a little bit different angle than you are. And it'll be clear during this interview that there's some things that I don't have the answer to, but I would be looking for various groups to do that. And so where are some of the things that we can agree on? Because, you don't have to agree with somebody completely to agree to work with them on things. And so I'll be looking for those kinds of ideas from SOCAN that says, okay, we have these multifaceted issues, and what part of it can SOCAN play into solving those issues? So that's just a basic governance way I do things. I know that sometimes the word synergy gets into this, but I tend to use that term a lot because, again, I think that's what an elected leader is elected to do.
Great, thank you so much. So our first question is, the increasing droughts we've been facing have resulted in frequent and substantial water shortages. Please explain what you think the county government should do to address the increasingly difficult problems of water availability and management. How would you deal with lack of water to provide sufficient irrigation?
So when I saw this question, I decided that, you know what, I don't know, I wanted to talk with folks that are in the irrigation districts and all. So I did call up the director of, for example, in this case, the Talon Irrigation District, and I found out that, his comment was that right now, and even in this year, they've got enough water. They've actually done some pretty good work on making the system more efficient. So my question to him was, well, you're an independent agency from the county, but what are some of the things that can be done? And the number one thing is to make that water system more efficient. This WISE project's been kicked around for a long, long time. There ought to be I believe that the state should be putting some money into that. One of the other issues he says comes up is the fact that this water system was designed years ago for certain periods or certain capacity, and so now he's got to be thinking about the fish and all those. And well, that's not part of it. So his feeling was, and I agree with this, is to advocate for some more funds to make that system more efficient. Because he says right now, when he looks at for example, for the Talent Irrigation District, when he looks at their numbers, they've got enough water, even on some not so good years like this one. Of course, this is not such a good year, but again, that's where I would be with that issue.
Great, thank you. Next question. Given that many species, particularly apex predators such as wolves, bears, and cougars, are at risk, please explain why you would or would not favor more protections for these and other species, such as habitat preservation and hunting restrictions. Also describe how well you think your county is meeting goals to ensure maintenance of biodiversity and healthy wildlife populations.
Well, first thing I did was I went to the county plan to look at whether or not there actually is any goals that are set up for biodiversity and healthy wildlife, and I didn't see any. I couldn't find any, and so I can't answer that question. Whether or not that's something that needs to be done later, of course, is an entirely different issue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm a hunter and a fisherman, and I recognize that this is done in many cases by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. This is very much a state issue. But you know, this county has got a lot of open space for all of these different species, and we need to maintain that open space so that they can thrive. And many of them are doing quite well. So again, because the county doesn't have any goals right now, the question would be, okay, does SOCAN think there ought to be some goals that would be a county issue? Because right now I don't see the county engaged in it at all, and I don't know enough about. I don't have an answer to, well, how should the county be involved? Because that's a whole different issue than how should the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, for example, or how should the U.S. Those are bigger issues. So
got it. Mm-hmm. Okay, good. All right, thank you. Okay, the third question. Fire ecologists argue that climate change is the single greatest contributor to wildfires. What do you think should be done in the short term and long term to address the problem of fire and smoke bedeviling the county?
Well, you know, I have friends in the forestry with forestry degrees and all, and I also have know that the county has done a study about the issues of smoke and all, and what their findings actually were that was the issue that we've got here is these federal policies about maintaining our forests and how we manage our forests and some of the let it burn. And I was pleased to see over the last couple of years the federal government is changing their ideas about let it burn. And so the issue is, well, when you look at the climate, how much would working on climate issues impact the immediacy of where we are right now, given how long it takes to get those different policies to either be in effect or to have them have an effect? Whereas the short-term answer to this is the better management of them and of our forests, and that includes utilizing the resources that are there. You know, again, I have friends that are forestry, have degrees in forestry, and they say there is a way to do this. This is another one of those ones where you see way too much of a disparity between various positions on this one. I really do think that there's a middle ground here that we can come to, and we can have both.
Good, thank you. Do you believe that Oregon's statewide land use system, which requires counties and cities to regularly update their plans in sync with statewide goals, is working properly? If not, what changes would you advocate in the statewide land use goals and your county's current plans?
Okay, well, first off, I spent 8 years on the Ashland Planning Commission. I got very, very familiar with land use codes and state land use regulations and all, and so I feel very, very comfortable with that issue. Now, I have not specifically gone through and looked at the county's land use code and all. And that would be something I would do immediately, because it's just, it's one of those things that most people would look at it and their eyes would glaze over. I find it kind of fascinating, actually. That's I know that's sick, but it actually is, because after you work in them for a while, you just sort of get comfortable with reading, and in fact, reading between the lines. And obviously, we have to make sure that our land use code is in compliance with the state plans. But the governor now has decided that she wants to bring climate action into all the different agencies, and so my assumption is that we're going to probably see some pretty big changes here, or some changes in those statewide goals. And also, that's something that I think as a county commissioner, you're going to need to work with to make sure that you're in compliance, and that one of the issues that I have, and I think many of us in this area have, and we're seeing it right now with this pandemic and things like that, is sort of this one size fits all issue. And I saw that very, very clearly as a planning commissioner in Ashland. You would look at some of these things, you say, you know what, that makes sense for Portland, but that just doesn't make any sense for little old Ashland. It just doesn't. And again, I think that would, as an advocate, I would be advocating to make sure that everything is staying together, but I would also make sure that it comports with who Jackson County is.
Great, thank you. Next question. As a county commissioner, how would you work to improve the service and financing of your county's public transit system?
Now, interestingly, I know Julie Brown very, very well of RVTD. I count her as a friend. And so when this question came to me, I just picked up the phone and called Julie and said, okay, Julie, what do you think here? And so we had this very pleasant conversation. And I also have friends who are on the regional transportation planning. They're very, very heavily involved in that too. First off, the number one thing that the county commissioners need to make sure of is that we have an efficient transportation system, of which this is part of it, and where those pieces fit together. But we need to be looking at that holistically and work together with that. Again, Julie and I were chatting about this, and again, it was one of those, okay, well, we can work together on this. She clearly would like to have a few more funds from the county and all that. But the issue again is this larger issue of what does our transportation system look like, and how do we make sure, because, well, first off, you're not going to get everybody out of their cars. You're just, you're going to build certain things that work for those people that decide they want to drive, because that's what they're going to want to do. But then how does that fit in with this larger piece? So improving the service and financing of the transit system. Now you got to step back from it and look at it. The service needs to match up with what your overall plan is.
Thank you. Given the consensus among climate scientists that global warming is a reality and human activity is largely responsible, what do you think should be the county's top 3 or 4 priorities to address the climate crisis?
Okay. One thing that I think a politician and a candidate should always be honest about is, I don't have a plan. I literally do not know. When I looked at those, I said, I don't know what those are. What does SOCAN think they ought to be? And I'd be more than willing to sit down and you guys tell me what you think they should be. Okay. And we're, again, back to that multifaceted, we need to fit into that, because as I go through all the county documents, and I'm kind of looking at where things are, and I remember as a planning commissioner where we started to think about things like climate change and those kinds of things. I got to tell you, I'm not sure where the county fits into that and what the role of the county government is. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's go ahead and look at all of our plans and all of our policies and see where we can work together on these things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Methane is a greenhouse gas 86 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Given the inevitable emissions of methane that would result from the proposed Pembina Jordan Cove LNG export facility and pipeline, please explain where you stand on the project and why you reached that conclusion.
Okay. My view is on this one is again looking at the larger economics of this, and the fact and it all is that I'm in support of the project, except for one thing: the eminent domain issue. The eminent domain issue really bothers me, and I was on the planning commission when the kilo came down from the U.S. Supreme Court, and I was absolutely appalled by that. Again, that's the law. That's the way it is. And as a planning commissioner, I had to follow that law. I think we would be making a mistake if we did not recognize the economic and employment opportunities we're looking at here, and what this can mean to some very, very economically depressed areas of Oregon. That this is one of those issues where you look at it and you say, you know, this is something that has got to be done, because if you just look at the economics of this large project and what it can mean to an awful lot of people. And so again, back to my multifaceted concept of this. That's where I am with that project.
Okay, thank you. Many communities across the globe and here in Oregon have developed climate action plans designed to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and prepare for the changing climate. Do you think the county should develop a climate action plan? Please explain your response, and if you think it should be done, how would you suggest accomplishing it?
You know, one of my graduate degrees is in strategic planning and all. And one of the things that I'm very leery of coming up with a climate action plan, and what I've seen way too many of these plans just end up being put together. People have put a lot of effort into them, and then they just go and they just sit on a shelf. I would rather see us spend our limited resources. And in this particular case, we're not talking money here, we're talking time, because these are very, very complex issues. And if you want to sit down at a table and work through these things, boy, it takes a lot of time to do that. I would rather see us come to agreement on some things that we can agree on. You know, can we agree on, for example, look, energy efficiency? You know, wherever you are with climate change, energy efficiency is an incredibly important thing. Well, it serves two purposes. It's an economic issue, and it's also a climate change issue. What about mitigation? Are there issues that we can be working together on mitigation? Because the climate is always changing, and so we know that things are going to be changing. And not only that, the population's always changing, the economy is always changing. All these things are there's always this movement and this churn, for lack of a better term. There's this churn, and so my position would be, I would be very leery of a particular plan where we do that, as opposed to an ongoing dialogue and an ongoing planning process where all these pieces are brought into it.
Okay, thank you. And I think we're coming into our last question.
Mm-hmm.
Please offer your thoughts on how, as a member of the Board of County Commissioners, you would want to play a role in reducing the impacts of climate change in your county and encourage coronavirus recovery efforts that add renewable energy jobs, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, sequester carbon, and promote social justice.
Boy, there's a lot in there. Okay, so let's just go back to the basic idea that I presented at the beginning, which is this. You know, as a county commissioner, as an elected leader, your responsibility is to bring all the different folks to the table, all the different viewpoints to the table, and bring that and look at it and look for the synergy that you can bring together in addressing in these particular issues. And so when you ask the question of the impact of climate change and on these other pieces, what I'm looking at is, well, how can you bring that synergy together? And because I can tell you that there are people, of course, who are going to be saying, well, if you do this, this is what it's going to do to the less fortunate, for example. And that's why the economic piece of this. I've been spending a lot of time over the last few weeks getting as a candidate, speaking with the social service agencies, and we got a lot of problems in Jackson County. And boy, the last thing you want to do is do something that is harmful to the economy, because at the end of the day, we all know that when you harm the economy, there are certain people that pay a steeper price than anybody else. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. I just don't want to get into that. So again, let's get back to these ideas of energy efficiency, mitigation techniques. What can we agree to work on together that address multiple issues?
Okay. And now, Dave, you can take up to 2 minutes for your closing remarks.
Well, I don't really have much to add on this. One of the things that I had the rare privilege of doing was working up in the state legislature on budget issues and things like that with the likes of Dennis Richardson, and working with him when he was the Secretary of State. And what strikes me is that there's not as much of a joining between rural areas of Oregon and what happens in Salem, and that impacts lots of things, but it particularly impacts this area right here. And so I would really like to see that those pieces fit together much better. And I don't have anything else to add about synergy and multifaceted. I think I covered all that. In fact, I probably bored you on that one.
No, not at all. Thank you. Well, this concludes our interview then with Dave Dotterrer, candidate for Jackson County Commissioner. Thank you so much, Dave, for joining us. To our viewers out there, and to Carmen Prophet for driving the technology that made this possible. Have a wonderful afternoon, Dave. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.